Have you ever wondered if an animal could hold a memory so tightly that after 20 years apart, it would seek out the one who showed it kindness when it was at its weakest? Picture the vast Serengeti plains under a scorching sun, the land stretching in endless waves of golden grass. No roar cuts through the air, only the whisper of the wind and a pair of soft, deliberate footsteps. Then, out of that silence, a massive head appears, May rippling like molten bronze in the late afternoon light. The lion tilts his head, and there, on the shoulder of the woman who once cradled him as a trembling cub, he rests his cheek. Could it be the same person who saved his life? The moment hangs in the hot air like a question mark that the heart alone can answer. And you won't believe what happens next. Back in 2005, the dry season had turned the Serengeti into a dusty furnace. Flames from a runaway wildfire had seared across the brush, leaving charred earth and curling blackened twigs behind. Rosa, a young volunteer with a soft smile and steady hands, was inspecting the damage when she heard a faint rustle in the bushes. A tiny, trembling sound that spoke of terror and pain. There, half hidden under the smouldering remains of a termite mound, lay a lion cub, no bigger than a house cat, its paw scorched, its eyes wide and glistening with tears. Without a second thought, Rosa knelt, her jacket slipping from her shoulders as she scooped the cub into her arms. The smoke stung her nostrils, and the cub's tiny heartbeat fluttered against her chest. "I'll call you Canu," she whispered, brushing charred dust from its whiskers, and in that instant their lives intertwined in a bond that neither time nor distance would ever break. Canu grew faster than anyone expected, his legs thickening, his muzzle darkening, but in his heart he never outgrew the comfort of Rosa's lap. Night after night, he would curl up on a tattered blanket, suckling from a bottle with a soft growl of contentment whenever the wind rustled the tent flaps. He pounced on Rosa's shoelaces as if they were great beasts, nuzzled her hair with a kitten's gentleness, and learned to trust the touch of a human hand. But when the cub turned 1, Rosa received a letter from the organization. Canu had to return to the wild. It felt like a knife twisting in her chest. On the morning of his release, she opened the gate to the training enclosure and knelt beside him. Canu paused, then looked up at her with eyes that seemed to whisper, "Will you forget me?" Rosa's voice trembled as she said, "Be strong out there, but if you ever miss your mum, you can come back." With that, Canu slipped into the tall grass, leaving Rosa standing alone, her heart pounding with a promise she wasn't sure could ever be kept. 20 years drifted by like the slow turning of the seasons. Rosa's dark hair silvered to the colour of moonlight, and she settled into a quiet coastal town with her daughter Maria. Each morning, the aroma of sea salt mixed with minty tea as Rosa sat on her porch. An old photograph in her lap showing a young woman sharing a tree shade with a tiny lion. She traced the picture's edges with a finger, remembering Canu's soft purr, the way he nestled into her shoulder. One summer day, Maria, now a wildlife photographer with a camera always slung around her neck, looked into her mother's eyes and said, "Let's go back to the Serengeti." At first, Rosa shook her head, thinking of her peaceful routine. But Maria's gaze held an unspoken plea, and something warm stirred in Rosa's chest. So she said yes, and together they booked a flight that would carry them straight into the heart of her oldest hope. A worn safari truck rumbled across golden waves of grass, its engine humming like an excited animal. The wind tugged at Rosa's shirt, carrying scents of dusty earth and distant rain. Their guide, a young man whose eyes held both pride and reverence for the land, shared tales of elephants that strode like living columns, cheetahs that could outrun the wind, and hyenas whose laughter echoed through moonlit nights. Then he paused, his voice lowering, as if telling a secret. "There's a lion in the southern reserve we call Canu," he said. "He's old now, thick mane, gentle eyes. He never hunts near people. Once he even pressed his head against one of our staff." Rosa's hand clenched the seat's edge. Could it truly be him? The truck slowed, her heart drumming so loudly she thought even the birds would hear. What would happen when she saw him again? The truck ground to a halt, and Rosa peered through the dust-swirled air. There, walking with cautious grace toward them, was a lion more magnificent than any she had dreamed of. Mane glowing like fire, muscles rippling under tawny fur, paws silent on the dry earth. His amber eyes scanned the group without alarm. No growl, no roar, just purpose in every measured step, as if you were following an invisible thread leading straight to her. The guide raised a hand, whispering, "Stay still." But Rosa felt a pull she could neither name nor resist. "Mom," Maria warned softly, but Rosa was already opening the truck door. The grass brushed her ankles like a carpet laid for a queen, and she took a trembling breath. What would happen when two worlds that once collided met again after so long? 10 steps separated them, then 5, each one tightening the knot in Rosa's chest. The lion halted, his great head lifting. He opened his mouth in a quiet, low cry, a sound more like a child's sob than a predator's roar. Kanu pressed his forehead into Rosa's shoulder, and she felt the roughness of his mane against her cheek, his breath warm and rhythmic. A hush fell over the onlookers. No shutter clicks, no whispers. Only the meeting of two souls recognizing each other across time. Rosa laid her hand on his mane, her fingertips trembling as if they carried the memory of every moment they shared. In that suspended silence, the world seemed to lean in, waiting, breath held for what would come next. Word of the reunion rippled through the reserve like a whispered legend. Skeptics called it happenstance, an old lion drawn by curiosity or scent. Yet a keeper unearthed Rosa's long-forgotten records, revealing Kanu written in her own hand beside the note. Orphaned, cared for by volunteer Rosa. Soon a photograph of Rosa entwined in Kanu's mane lit up wildlife forums, evoking tears from viewers around the globe. Zoologists debated whether scent or emotion held the key to such memory, but Rosa dismissed the need for explanations. "Love doesn't wait for science," she said, her eyes misting with joy. "When you give your heart completely, some soul out there remembers." And as that simple truth spread, it touched corners of the human spirit that logic could never reach. Before leaving, Rosa was granted one final afternoon with Kanu. She climbed onto a broad, sun-warmed rock, while the lion settled beside her, shoulders grazing hers like an old friend leaning in. The sky blazed in shades of orange and purple as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the grass. Rosa, her heart full, leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." Kanu responded not with words, but with the gentle press of his head against her hand, a quiet affirmation that some promises are never broken. And in that luminous dusk, human and lion watched the horizon together, two souls bound by a love that even time could not erase. Back home, the documentary of their reunion found its way into classrooms. Libraries and nature centres carrying a story without fashy edits or pounding soundtracks. Just the simple, unvarnished truth of a bond that transcends species. It left audiences asking, what other hearts out there remember us? What lives have we touched without ever knowing? As you reflect on Kanu and Rosa's journey, remember that love, given freely and without condition, writes its own story in the wild places of the world and in the hidden corners of our own hearts. Somewhere out there, a soul may be waiting to say one last tender word, "I remember."